A billionaire's son was failing every math test. The father hired the best tutors money could buy, but nothing worked. Then his new assistant made a shocking claim. "I can help him, but you have to trust me." What she discovered wasn't a learning disability, but a conspiracy that would tear their family apart. What's the biggest secret you've ever uncovered? Let us know in the comments and get ready for a story you won't forget. Julian Vance's world was a fortress of glass and steel, 48 floors above the noise of the city. From his penthouse office atop Vance Tower, he controlled a global tech empire built on cold, hard logic. Numbers were his language, algorithms his gospel. He could predict market fluctuations to the decimal point and model corporate takeovers in his sleep. His life was a monument to absolute control, a kingdom of sterile perfection. But there was one variable he couldn't solve: his 8-year-old son, Leo. The phone call was an unwelcome intrusion, a crack in the flawless glass of his afternoon. Mr. Albright, the headmaster of the most exclusive preparatory school in the state, spoke in hushed, apologetic tones. "Mr. Vance, it's about Leo's latest mathematics assessment." Julian's jaw tightened. He didn't need to ask. He stared at the glowing stock ticker on one of his 6 monitors, the green and red arrows a familiar, comforting language, a language his own son couldn't seem to learn. "Let me guess, Albright, another failure." "I'm afraid so," the headmaster sighed. "It's not just the grade, Mr. Vance. He didn't answer a single question. He just drew circles on the page. We've provided him with the finest tutors. Perhaps it's time we considered more specialized testing for a learning disability." The words hit Julian like a physical blow. Disability, flaw, imperfection. Of Vance, his heir, branded as deficient. The shame was a bitter acid in his throat. He had built an empire on the bedrock of intellect, and his own bloodline was failing. It was a reflection on him, a crack in his legacy. He ended the call with a curt, dismissive word and swiveled his chair to face the panoramic window. The city sprawled below, a complex system he had mastered. Why couldn't he master this one small boy? He saw the email from the school land in his inbox. The subject line, a stark accusation. "Leo Vance, academic probation warning." Attached was a scan of the test. A big red F was slashed across the top of a page filled with Leo's frantic, looping circles. A quiet voice from the doorway startled him. "Mr. Vance?" It was his new executive assistant, Amara Jones. She'd been with him for 3 weeks, a quiet presence of unnerving efficiency. She was different from the string of polished corporate clones he usually hired. There was a stillness about her, an observant quality that made him vaguely uncomfortable. She held a sleek tablet with his afternoon schedule. "What is it?" he snapped, minimizing the damning test paper. Her eyes flickered to the screen for a fraction of a second before meeting his. She didn't flinch from his anger. "Your 4 o'clock has been rescheduled, that's all." She should have left. Any other assistant would have evaporated from the doorway, but she remained, her gaze steady. Then she did the unthinkable. She stepped into his sanctuary, her expression not one of pity, but of analysis. "I overheard the call, sir. I apologize," she said, her voice soft but firm. She nodded toward the screen he thought he'd hidden. Maybe the problem isn't the numbers. The audacity of it stole his breath. This woman, this assistant, dared to offer her opinion on his son, on a matter that was currently tearing his carefully constructed world apart? "And what, precisely, would you know about it, Miss Jones?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "I know children," she said simply, "and I know that sometimes when a smart kid can't get the right answer, it's because they're being asked the wrong question." The statement was so absurd, so contrary to his entire worldview, that it shattered his anger and left him momentarily speechless. It was the first pebble tossed against his fortress wall. and he had no idea the avalanche it was about to unleash. Julian's first instinct was to fire her. The sheer presumption was grounds for immediate dismissal. Who was she to question a system propped up by the best educational psychologists and most expensive tutors money could buy? He had built his life on a foundation of data and expertise, and she was offering platitudes. "I am paying a team of specialists a combined $2,000 an hour to ask my son the right questions, Ms. Jones," he said, the words dripping with ice. "I hardly think your insights from managing my calendar are required." Amara didn't back down. That was the most infuriating thing. She stood her ground, a small, unmovable object against the force of his wealth and power. "With all due respect, sir, they're failing. All of them. You're desperate, or you wouldn't be looking at his test scores with the same intensity you used to analyze a hostile takeover." She was right. That's what stung the most. The desperation was a corrosive agent eating away at his composure. He had thrown money at the problem, the same way he would solve a supply chain issue or a software bug. But Leo wasn't code. He was a broken equation, and the failure to solve him was a personal indictment. "What is your proposal?" he finally asked, the question tasting like surrender. "Give me 1 week with him," she said, her voice filled with a quiet confidence that was both maddening and intriguing. "After work hours, no tutors, no pressure, just me and him. If you don't see a difference in 7 days, I'll tender my resignation myself." It was a cynical bargain, but it was a new strategy. Every other path had led to a dead end. "Fine," Julian conceded. The word clipped. 1 week, but I will be observing. And if this is some kind of sentimental nonsense, you're gone." "Understood," she said, with a nod that felt more like an agreement between equals than an employee to her boss. The first session was a study in everything Julian detested. He watched from the security feed in his office, a ghost in his own home. The sprawling penthouse living room, usually a pristine space of minimalist furniture and modern art, was now littered with wooden blocks and colored pencils. Amara and Leo sat on the floor, not at the large mahogany table, where his tutors usually drilled him. There were no flashcards, no workbooks, no frantic recitation of multiplication tables. Amara was telling him a story about a king who needed to build a wall to protect his castle. How many bricks would he need for a wall 10 feet long and 5 feet high? Leo, who usually shut down at the mere mention of numbers, was captivated. He wasn't thinking about math. He was thinking about defending a kingdom. He started arranging the blocks, not in neat numerical piles, but into walls and towers. Julian felt a surge of irritation. This was a game, a waste of time. He was about to storm in and end the charade when his sister, Eleanor, swept into his office. Eleanor Vance was the COO of Vance Industries, the public face of the company to his reclusive genius. She was sharp, ambitious, and the only person he trusted implicitly. "Another late night, brother?" she asked, her eyes scanning the security feed on his monitor. She clicked her tongue. "Julian, what is this? Is that your new assistant playing with blocks? You fired Dr. Albright's top referral for this?" "It's an experiment," Julian said defensively. "It's a folly," Eleanor countered, her tone laced with practiced concern. "Leo needs structure, discipline. You're letting an unqualified girl indulge his fantasies. He needs a firmer hand, someone who won't let him get away with this." She gestured at the screen in disgust. "This will only set him back further. You need to call the specialists back, for Leo's sake." Her words reinforced his every doubt. He was being foolish, letting his desperation lead him down a path of wishful thinking. He was about to pick up the phone and end it, to thank Ms. Jones for her time and show her the door, when he saw something on the screen that made him pause. Leo had arranged the blocks into a complex, symmetrical pattern, a perfect visual representation of 5 by 10. He pointed to it. Amara asked him a question, and Leo answered. his voice too low for the microphone to pick up. But then Amara looked up directly at the hidden camera in the ceiling, and she smiled. It was a small, knowing smile that sent a chill down Julian's spine. It was a smile that said, "You see?" At the end of the week, Amara requested a formal meeting. She entered Julian's office not as an assistant, but as a consultant presenting a final report. She placed no documents on his desk, no charts or data points. Instead, she laid down a single piece of paper. It was a drawing Leo had made. At first glance, it was just a child's sketch of a castle. But as Julian looked closer, he saw the intricate detail. The ramparts were constructed of perfectly repeating geometric shapes. The windows were arranged in symmetrical patterns. The number of stones in each turret was a multiple of 3. It was a blueprint, a visual algorithm. "Your son is not bad at math, Mr. Vance," Amara said softly. "He's suffocating from it." The tutors were trying to force him to think in a language he doesn't speak. Leo thinks in pictures. He thinks in systems and stories. He has one of the most brilliant visual spatial minds I've ever seen. Julian stared at the drawing, a roaring in his ears. All this time, he had seen his son's failure to learn as a defect. He never once considered that the defect was in the teaching. Amara then placed a simple first-grade math workbook on the desk, open to a page of word problems. "Read the first one," she prompted. "If Jenny has 8 apples and gives 3 to Tom, how many apples does Jenny have left?" "This is how Leo sees that problem," Amara said. She took a pen and crossed it out. Beside it, she wrote, "The Red Knight has 8 soldiers. The dragon captures 3. How many soldiers are left to defend the king?" She slid the book across the desk. "Ask him." Leo was waiting just outside the office. Julian, his heart pounding with a strange mixture of dread and hope, called him in. He felt a tremor in his hand as he pointed to the revised problem. "Leo," he said, his voice hoarse, Can you solve this one for me?" Leo looked at the page, his brow furrowed in concentration. Julian braced for the usual response, the mumbled, "I don't know," the frustrated tears, the complete shutdown. But this time, Leo's eyes lit up. "The Red Knight has 5 soldiers left," he said, his voice clear and certain. "But that's okay, because the Archer Tower can take out the dragon before it reaches the castle gate." The answer was so simple, so correct, and yet it felt like a miracle. It was the undeniable proof, the DNA test of his son's intelligence. His entire approach, his army of experts, his unshakable faith in conventional methods, all of it had been wrong, so profoundly, devastatingly wrong. His world didn't just crack, it shattered. In that moment, Julian Vance, the master of a global empire, understood that he knew nothing at all about his own son. He looked at Amara, and for the first time he felt not irritation or suspicion, but a deep, humbling sense of gratitude. "You're right," he said, the admission a weight off his soul. He turned to the intercom on his desk. "Cancel all of Leo's tutoring appointments, indefinitely." He then looked at Amara. "You have my full support, whatever you need." A flicker of hope ignited in the cold, empty chambers of his heart. But beneath it, a dark question began to form. If Amara could see this so clearly, why couldn't anyone else? Why did it feel like everyone else wanted his son to fail? The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution. Julian began to carve out time from his relentless schedule, not just to observe Amara's sessions with Leo, but to participate. At first, he was a clumsy intruder in their world of myth and imagination. He was a man who spoke in profit margins and market caps, suddenly asked to discuss the structural integrity of a Lego fortress or the flight trajectory of a paper dragon. Amara was his patient translator. "Don't ask him for the equation, Mr. Vance," she'd murmur, when he reverted to his old ways. "Ask him how many reinforcements the wizard needs to send." The breakthrough came not in the sterile penthouse, but in the messy, unpredictable environment of a public park. Leo was in a large sandbox, building an elaborate system of canals and dams. Julian, standing stiffly in his tailored suit, saw only dirt and water. "He's calculating displacement and volume," Amara said beside him. "He just doesn't know it." Something compelled Julian to act. He took off his billion-dollar jacket, folded it carefully over a bench, and knelt in the sand beside his son. "The west wall looks weak," he said, his voice feeling foreign in this new context. "We could lose the whole city if that breaks." Leo looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. Then a slow, brilliant smile spread across his face. "I know. I need more buttresses." For the next hour, they weren't a billionaire and his disappointing son. They were a father and a boy, working together, building something from nothing. They laughed when a dam broke. They celebrated when they successfully diverted water around their sandcastle keep. For the first time since his wife's death, Julian felt a genuine, uncomplicated warmth spread through his chest. It was a feeling more valuable than any stock price, more rewarding than any successful acquisition. He was finally connecting with his son, and it was Amara who had built the bridge. He found himself relying on her more and more, not just for Leo, but for her calm, insightful perspective on everything. She had become an anchor in the turbulent sea of his life. The fragile bond with his son was strengthening daily, and the icy walls around his heart had begun to thaw. He was starting to believe that his broken family could be whole again. He was a fool to think it would be that easy. The viper in his nest was watching, and it was ready to strike. The attack came without warning. It was slick, professional, and aimed directly at the heart of Julian's newfound hope. A story appeared on a notorious online gossip site, complete with grainy photos of Amara and Leo in the park. "Troubled tech titan Julian Vance gambles son's future on unqualified assistant," the headline screamed. The article was a masterpiece of insinuation and poison. It painted Julian as a negligent, emotionally unstable father, and Amara as a manipulative opportunist. It quoted an anonymous source close to the family who worried that Vance was ignoring his son's severe learning disabilities and placing him in the care of a pretty face with no credentials. The fallout was immediate. The board members of Vance Industries started calling, their voices thick with concern. The company's stock, a sacred barometer of his success, dipped by 3 points. His private life, the one part of his world he guarded so jealously, had been weaponized and turned into a public spectacle. Fury, cold, and absolute washed over Julian. His first instinct was to protect. He summoned Amara to his office, the offending article burning on his monitor. "I'm sorry, Amara," he said, the words heavy. "This is my fault. You've been dragged into my world, and it's ugly. I'll release a statement, and my legal team will handle it. It might be best if you step back from working with Leo until this blows over." He expected her to be scared or angry. He did not expect her to be defiant. "Step back?" she asked, her eyes flashing with a fire he'd never seen before. "Absolutely not. Don't you see what this is, Mr. Vance? This isn't a random gossip piece. This is a targeted strike. Someone leaked those photos. Someone planted that story. They're doing this because Leo is getting better. They're doing it to stop us." Her words cut through his rage and hit him with the force of a physical blow. She was right. This wasn't just about him. The timing was too perfect. The attack was aimed squarely at the one thing that had started to heal him, his progress with Leo. It wasn't just a media attack. It was sabotage. "Someone doesn't want him to succeed," she repeated, her voice low and intense. Before Julian could process the chilling implication, his office door opened and Eleanor swept in, her face a perfect mask of sisterly concern. She held a tablet, her expression grave. "Julian, this is a catastrophe," she said, ignoring Amara completely. "But I think I can fix it. I've been on the phone all morning. The real problem isn't the blog, it's the tutoring agency, the one you fired. They're preparing to file a lawsuit." "A lawsuit? On what grounds?" Julian demanded. "Wrongful termination. Defamation," Eleanor said, her voice smooth and practiced. "They claim you've damaged their professional reputation by blaming them for Leo's condition. They say you're a desperate father being manipulated by an employee. It's a terrible look, but their lawyers think they have a case." She finally glanced at Amara, her eyes filled with disdain. "This has to end, Julian. You have to reinstate the professional tutors. Issue a public apology. It's the only way to kill the lawsuit and the story. It's the only way to protect the company, to protect Leo." It was all too neat. A problem and a solution presented to him by the one person he trusted. But Amara's words echoed in his head. Someone doesn't want him to succeed. He looked at his sister, her face etched with worry, and for the first time in his life, he felt a sliver of ice in his veins. The attack felt coordinated, like a corporate takedown. And the person offering him the only way out was the one who stood to gain the most from his failure. The suspicion, once planted, grew into a monstrous, thorny vine, choking out the trust he had given his sister his entire life. This wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a conspiracy. And Julian Vance knew how to dismantle a conspiracy. He did not call the old tutors. He did not issue an apology. Instead, he made a different call to a man who didn't exist in any corporate directory. Marcus Thorne was a ghost, a former intelligence operative who now ran the most discreet private security and investigation firm in the world. He was the man billionaires called when problems couldn't be solved with money alone. "I need you to find a leak, Marcus," Julian said, his voice a low hum of controlled rage over the encrypted line. "I want to know who tipped off the blog. I want to know who is behind this lawsuit. I want every email, every phone record, every bank transfer. I want the head of the snake, and I want it yesterday." Marcus worked with terrifying speed. He didn't just investigate the present, he exhumed the past. Within 48 hours, the first report landed in Julian's encrypted inbox. The burner phone that had called the gossip columnist was traced to a public library 2 blocks from Vance Tower. The security footage showed a woman in a trench coat and a hat, her face obscured. But the expensive, custom-made leather briefcase she carried was unmistakable. It was a one-of-a-kind gift Julian had given Eleanor for her birthday last year. The blood drained from Julian's face. It was circumstantial, but it was a start. The second report arrived 12 hours later. It was a full financial workup of the tutoring agency and its director, Dr. Peterson. On the surface, everything was clean. But Marcus had dug deeper into offshore accounts and shell corporations. He found it, a series of 5 anonymous wire transfers over the past year, totaling over $500,000, made to Dr. Peterson. The payments were staggered, beginning shortly after Leo first started showing academic difficulties. The final piece of the puzzle came in the early hours of the morning. Marcus had hacked Dr. Peterson's personal email server, and there it was, an email chain between Peterson and a private encrypted address. The instructions were cold, clinical, and monstrous. Continue to utilize rote memorization drills. Avoid all visual aids. The objective is to increase anxiety around numerical concepts. Report any signs of progress immediately. Your bonus is contingent on his continued failure. Julian felt the air leave his lungs. Someone had paid a fortune not just to tutor his son, but to psychologically sabotage him, to intentionally make him fail, to break him. With shaking hands, he forwarded the encrypted email address to Marcus. The response came in less than 5 minutes. It was a single line of text. The email address is registered to a shell corporation. The corporation is owned by a private trust. The sole signatory and beneficiary of that trust is Eleanor Vance. The world went silent. The city lights outside his window blurred into meaningless streaks of color. His own sister, the person he had trusted with his company, his legacy, his family. She had been poisoning his son, orchestrating his pain, all while pretending to be his concerned, loyal confidant. The betrayal was so absolute, so profoundly evil, it felt like a physical wound. It wasn't a crack in his world anymore. It was a gaping, black abyss, and he was falling. Even as the truth clawed at his insides, Julian had to maintain a facade of normality. The final negotiations for the Vance-Nakamura merger were happening in less than 24 hours. It was a $50 billion deal, the culmination of his life's work, a deal Eleanor had championed and expertly negotiated. She was playing the final moves in a chess game where he hadn't even realized he was a pawn. He sat across from her in the boardroom, the unsigned contracts a mountain between them, and felt nothing but a cold, desolate rage. She was radiant, confident, the picture of a corporate titan at the height of her power. "The final call with Nakamura-san is scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow," she said, her voice crisp. "Just a formality. He's ready to sign." "We did it, Julian. We actually did it." Julian simply nodded, his mind racing. He had the proof, but what was her endgame? Why cripple his son? He got his answer that evening. His private line rang. It was Mr. Nakamura's chief of staff, his voice rigid with protocol and disapproval. "Mr. Vance, an urgent matter has arisen. Nakamura-san has received some disturbing information." "What information?" Julian asked, his blood turning to ice. "A confidential psychological report concerning your son, Leo," the man said. "It details severe emotional instability and behavioral issues. It was delivered to us anonymously. The report, combined with the recent media stories about your unconventional domestic situation, has given Mr. Nakamura serious pause. He questions your stability and your focus. He is calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. He is prepared to walk away from the deal entirely." The final piece of the trap snapped shut. Eleanor's masterstroke. She had engineered the entire crisis. First, she'd created Leo's problem. Then she'd leaked the story about his instability in hiring Amara. And now, the finishing blow, a forged medical report to make him look like an unfit father and an unreliable CEO at the most critical moment of his career. Her motive was suddenly horrifyingly clear. If the deal collapsed because of his instability, the board would lose faith. She would paint him as a broken man, a grieving widower who had lost his grip. She would call for a vote of no confidence. She wouldn't just win the company, she would seize it, leaving him with nothing but a reputation in ruins and a son she had systematically broken. She would present herself as the savior, the stable hand needed to right the ship. The choice she had manufactured for him was brutal and clear. To save the deal, he would have to publicly capitulate. He'd have to fire Amara, denounce her methods, and hand Leo back over to the very people who were paid to torture him. He would have to sacrifice his son's soul on the altar of his empire. Or he could lose everything he had ever built. The storm broke over the city just before dawn, lashing against the windows of the Vance Tower boardroom. It was a fitting backdrop for the war to come. On the massive video screen, the faces of Mr. Nakamura and his board were grim and impassive. In the room, Julian's own board members shifted nervously, and at the head of the table across from him sat Eleanor, her expression a perfect blend of concern for her brother and gravity for the business at hand. She was the picture of control. Julian walked into the room just as the meeting began. He looked tired, worn, exactly as Eleanor had planned. She gave him a subtle, encouraging nod, the loving sister supporting her beleaguered brother. The sight of it made his stomach turn. Mr. Nakamura spoke first, his voice polite but firm. "Mr. Vance, we have been presented with information that calls your judgment into question. Before we sign this historic deal, we require reassurance. We must know that Vance Industries is and will remain in stable hands." All eyes turned to Julian. This was his moment, the one Eleanor had engineered. He was supposed to grovel, to explain, to announce the corrective actions he was taking. He was supposed to sacrifice his family to save his company. Instead, he stood up and walked to the head of the table. He didn't look at the screen. He looked directly at his sister. "There is indeed a question of stability in this company," Julian said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the silent room. "But it is not mine." He placed a single tablet on the table and swiped his finger across the screen. The first document that appeared was a bank statement, a transfer of $100,000 from a shell corporation to Dr. Peterson. Eleanor's smile tightened. "Julian, what is this?" He swiped again. "An email. The objective is to increase anxiety. Your bonus is contingent on his continued failure." A flicker of panic in Eleanor's eyes. "This is absurd. Hacked documents? This is irrelevant." "Is it?" Julian said, his voice rising, gaining power. "Is this irrelevant?" He swiped again, showing the still from the library security camera. The woman in the trench coat, the custom briefcase. "And is this irrelevant?" The final swipe revealed the document tracing the Shell Corporation, the private trust, back to a single name, Eleanor Vance. A collective gasp went through the room. Eleanor shot to her feet, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. "This is a lie. Julian is unwell. He's paranoid. He's lashing out." "You paid them to hurt my son," Julian roared, the sound echoing in the glass fortress. "You paid them to break an 8-year-old boy, to make him think he was stupid, to make him fail." All of this, the media leaks, the fake lawsuit, the forged report you sent to Mr. Nakamura, all of it was you. You did this to my son, to your own nephew. For what? For this company? The truth, raw and ugly, hung in the air. Eleanor's composure finally shattered, her face contorting in a snarl of pure hatred. The mask was gone. The viper was revealed. Julian turned his back on her, facing the stunned faces on the video screen. "Mr. Nakamura," he said, his voice now calm and clear as a bell, "you are right to question the stability of this company's leadership. Therefore, effective immediately, the Vance-Nakamura merger is off." He didn't wait for a response. He clicked a button on the console, and the screen went black. The $50 billion deal was dead. He turned back to his sister, who stared at him, ruined. "You are no longer an officer of this company," he said, the words like stones. "You are no longer a part of this family. Security will escort you out. Get out of my building." He didn't watch her go. He simply stood there as his empire fractured, feeling not loss, but liberation. 6 months later, the world looked different. The sterile gray penthouse had been transformed. Colorful drawings were taped to the walls, and an enormous, sprawling Lego city covered what was once a priceless Persian rug. The silence had been replaced by the sound of laughter. Julian was on the floor, his suit jacket and tie long forgotten, helping Leo build a magnificent rocket ship. They weren't talking about numbers or equations. They were debating the optimal fuel-to-payload ratio for reaching a distant, imaginary planet. "Dad, we need more struts for the fuselage, or it'll break apart during atmospheric entry," Leo declared, handing Julian a long gray piece. "You're right, Chief Engineer," Julian said, smiling. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. Amara sat on the sofa watching them. She was no longer his assistant. After the board had unanimously supported Julian's decision and ousted Eleanor's remaining loyalists, he had created a new philanthropic division for Vance Industries, focused on revolutionizing education for children with different learning styles. He had asked Amara to run it. More than that, she had become the quiet, steady center of their new family. Julian's phone buzzed on the coffee table, a news alert. Vance Industries' EdTech division stock soars on news of global partnership. He had lost the Nakamura merger, but by investing in his new passion, a passion born from his son's struggle, he had built something more meaningful and, ironically, more profitable. He glanced at the notification and put the phone back down without a second thought. His focus was here, on the floor, with his son. Leo put the final piece on top of the rocket. "It's finished," he said, his face glowing with pride. Julian put his arm around his son. Amara came and sat beside them, her hand finding his. Together the three of them looked at the completed rocket, a symbol of where they had been and how far they had come. Julian's old kingdom of glass and steel was gone, replaced by a new one. This kingdom wasn't built on logic and control, but on something far stronger, a foundation of trust, redemption, and a father's love for his son. It was a kingdom that was finally, completely whole.